By 2 a.m., the police station had transformed into a hub of federal activity. FBI agents, military officials, and government lawyers had descended upon the building like a coordinated military operation. General Thompson was finally released from holding, but the real battle was just beginning. Special Agent Walsh had completed her preliminary investigation and her findings were damning. Not only had Officer Kozlov falsely arrested General Thompson, but her review of his past cases revealed a pattern of corruption that stretched back years. She had uncovered at least 12 other cases where Kozlov had made questionable arrests, planted evidence, or falsified reports. "This is bigger than we initially thought," Agent Walsh reported to FBI Director Harrison in a secure phone call. "Kozlov isn't just a rogue officer making one mistake. He's been systematically corrupting the justice system for years, and the department has been covering for him." Director Harrison's response was swift and decisive. "I want a full task force assembled by morning. We're going to investigate every case Kozlov has touched in the past 5 years. If there are other victims, we're going to find them and get them justice." Meanwhile, General Thompson had been reunited with his wife Sarah and his military legal team. The relief on Sarah's face when she saw her husband was overwhelming, but it quickly turned to anger when she learned the details of his arrest. "Marcus, this is outrageous," she said, holding his hands tightly. "How dare they treat you like this after everything you've done for this country?" Colonel James Mitchell, the military's chief legal counsel, was equally outraged. "General, we're going to pursue this matter to the fullest extent of the law. Officer Kozlov and anyone who enabled him will face serious consequences." But General Thompson, despite his anger, remained focused on the bigger picture. "Colonel, this isn't just about me. If Kozlov has been doing this to other innocent people, we need to make sure they get justice too. A police badge doesn't give someone the right to destroy lives." As dawn broke over Chicago, the story exploded across national media. Major news networks picked up the story of the decorated Army general who had been falsely arrested by a corrupt police officer. The contrast was stark. On one side, a man who had dedicated his life to serving his country with honor, and on the other, a corrupt officer who had abused his power for personal gratification. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans organizations, military families, and civil rights groups all demanded justice. Social media was flooded with support for General Thompson and condemnation of Officer Kozlov, but the most powerful response came from an unexpected source. Private Marcus Williams, the young soldier whose brother had spoken to General Thompson in the holding cell, had posted a video online describing his encounter with the general. "I met this man in jail last night," Marcus said in the video that would soon go viral. "He was sitting there in handcuffs, falsely accused, but he still took the time to thank me for my brother's service. This is what real honor looks like, and anyone who can't see that is blind." The video was shared millions of times within hours, and it crystallized public opinion. This wasn't just about police corruption. It was about respect for the men and women who serve their country. Officer Derek Kozlov woke up that morning to find his entire world had collapsed. His phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters. His neighbors were staring at him with disgust, and his own family was learning about his actions through news reports. His wife, Linda, confronted him as he tried to leave for work. "Derek, is it true? Did you really arrest an innocent general and lie about it?" Kozlov tried to maintain his false narrative. "Linda, you don't understand. These military guys think they're above the law. I was just doing my job." But Linda had seen the news footage and the dash camera video that had been leaked to the media. "Derek, I watched the video. That man did nothing wrong, and you treated him like a criminal. How could you do such a thing?" The personal cost of his actions was becoming as devastating as the professional consequences. His children were being teased at school, his neighbors were avoiding him, and his reputation in the community was destroyed. At the police station, Captain Martinez was facing his own reckoning. The FBI investigation had revealed that the department's supervisory structure had failed catastrophically. Multiple complaints about Kozlov had been ignored or minimized, and no one had taken action to stop his corrupt behavior. Mayor Johnson arrived at the station for a meeting with FBI agents and was briefed on the full scope of the corruption. Her face grew paler with each revelation. How many innocent people has this man destroyed? She asked. Agent Rodriguez consulted his notes. So far, we've identified at least 15 cases that need to be reviewed. But based on the pattern, there could be dozens more. The mayor realized that the city was facing a potential legal and financial catastrophe. Every person who had been falsely arrested or wrongfully convicted based on Kozlov's lies could file lawsuits against the city. The financial damages could reach into the millions, but the damage to public trust was incalculable. What are you recommending? Mayor Johnson asked. Complete transparency, Agent Walsh replied. A full investigation, criminal charges where appropriate, and a comprehensive review of every case Kozlov has touched. The city needs to get ahead of this and show that it takes police corruption seriously. That afternoon, General Thompson held a press conference at the federal building. Dressed in his military uniform, he stood before a bank of cameras and microphones with quiet dignity. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to address the events of last night. While I am grateful for the overwhelming support I have received, I want to emphasize that this incident is not primarily about me. It's about a system that allowed corruption to flourish and innocent people to suffer. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. I have spent my entire adult life serving this great nation, fighting to protect the freedoms and rights that we all cherish. When those rights are violated by the very people who are sworn to protect them, we must all stand up and demand accountability. The general's words were measured and powerful. He called for a complete investigation, reforms in police oversight, and justice for all of Kozlov's victims. I will not rest until every person who has been wronged by this corrupt officer receives justice. That is my promise to the American people. The press conference was broadcast live across the nation and had an immediate impact. Politicians from both parties condemned Kozlov's actions and called for police reform. The public pressure became so intense that even Kozlov's police union was forced to distance itself from him. Behind the scenes, the FBI investigation was uncovering even more disturbing evidence. They discovered that Kozlov had been taking bribes from certain criminals in exchange for lighter treatment, while simultaneously targeting innocent citizens for harassment and false arrest. Detective Santos, who had first raised concerns about the arrest, was cooperating fully with the federal investigation. She provided agents with detailed information about Kozlov's suspicious behavior over the years. He always seemed to arrest people who couldn't fight back, Santos explained. Elderly citizens, immigrants, people who didn't speak English well. But he would go easy on certain criminals who seemed to have connections to him. This pattern of selective corruption made Kozlov's crimes even more heinous. He hadn't just been making mistakes. He had been deliberately targeting vulnerable people while protecting actual criminals. 3 days after the arrest, Officer Kozlov was formally charged with civil rights violations, conspiracy, bribery, and perjury. The federal charges carried potential sentences of up to 30 years in prison. As he was led into the courthouse in handcuffs, Kozlov finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of what he had done. The same handcuffs he had used to humiliate General Thompson were now restraining him as he faced his own justice. The irony was not lost on the crowd of protesters who had gathered outside the courthouse. Many were veterans who had come to show support for General Thompson and to demand accountability for police corruption. General Thompson himself attended the hearing, not out of vindictiveness, but to ensure that justice was served. He sat in the front row as Kozlov was arraigned, maintaining the same dignity he had shown throughout the entire ordeal. During the proceedings, Kozlov's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but federal prosecutors were not interested in leniency. The case had become a symbol of the fight against police corruption, and they intended to send a clear message. Your Honor, the federal prosecutor stated, this defendant didn't just violate one man's rights. He violated the rights of dozens of innocent people over many years. He abused his position of trust and authority, and he showed no remorse until he was caught. The investigation revealed that at least 28 people had been wrongfully arrested or convicted based on Kozlov's lies and fabricated evidence. The city was forced to dismiss dozens of cases and pay millions in settlements to his victims. 6 months later, Derek Kozlov was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. As he was led away, he finally broke down and apologized to General Thompson, who was again present in the courtroom. "General, I'm sorry," Kozlov said through tears. "I was wrong, and I destroyed innocent people's lives because of my own." Within minutes of General Thompson's phone call, the Secretary of Defense was making calls of his own. The first was to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Patricia Chun, who was at her home in Virginia when her secure phone rang. "Admiral, we have a situation in Chicago. General Thompson has been falsely arrested by a corrupt police officer. I need you to contact the FBI immediately and initiate a federal investigation." Admiral Chun was shocked. She had known General Thompson for over 15 years and had worked with him on several classified operations. The idea that he would be driving under the influence was not just unlikely, it was impossible. The general was known for his strict personal discipline and had never touched alcohol during his entire military career. "I'll contact Director Harrison right away," Admiral Chun replied. "What's the current status?" "He's being held at a Chicago precinct. I'm calling the mayor and the governor next." This cannot stand. While these high-level conversations were taking place, Officer Kozlov was completing his paperwork, still completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. He was actually feeling quite pleased with himself. Thinking that he had put an arrogant military officer in his place, Detective Santos had been watching the situation unfold, and her instincts were telling her that something was very wrong. She decided to review the dash camera footage from Kozlov's police cruiser, which was standard procedure for all traffic stops. What she saw made her blood run cold. The footage clearly showed General Thompson driving in a perfectly straight line, maintaining proper speed and using his turn signals appropriately. There was absolutely no evidence of impaired driving. Furthermore, the audio captured the entire interaction, and it was obvious that Kozlov had been hostile and aggressive from the very beginning. Without any justification, Detective Santos immediately took the footage to her supervisor, Captain Robert Martinez, a 25-year veteran who had always prided himself on running a clean department. "Captain, you need to see this," Santos said as she played the footage. Captain Martinez watched in growing horror as the scene unfolded. He could see immediately that Kozlov had fabricated the entire incident. The general had been polite and cooperative throughout the encounter, while Kozlov had been unnecessarily aggressive and had clearly lied about the field sobriety tests. "Dear God," Captain Martinez whispered, "what has Kozlov done?" Before the captain could take action, his phone rang. The caller ID showed the mayor's office. "Captain Martinez, this is Mayor Johnson. I need to speak with you immediately about the arrest of General Marcus Thompson." The captain's stomach dropped. If the mayor was calling personally about this arrest, it meant the situation was about to explode into something much bigger than a simple police matter. "Yes, Mayor Johnson. I was just reviewing the case. Captain, I've just received calls from the governor, a U.S. senator, and the Secretary of Defense. Apparently, your department has arrested one of the most decorated generals in the U.S. Army on what appear to be completely false charges. I need answers, and I need them now." Meanwhile, at the FBI field office in Chicago, Special Agent Jennifer Walsh was receiving her own urgent phone call. The director of the FBI himself was on the line, which was unusual for a local arrest matter. "Agent Walsh, I need you to immediately investigate the arrest of U.S. Army General Marcus Thompson by the Chicago Police Department. This comes directly from the highest levels of government, and I want a full report within hours." "Not days." Agent Walsh grabbed her partner, Special Agent Michael Rodriguez, and they headed immediately to the police station. They had been working public corruption cases for years, but they had never seen the federal government mobilize this quickly over a single arrest. Back at the police station, the night shift was about to experience something they would never forget. Captain Martinez was frantically trying to understand what had happened while also preparing for the arrival of federal agents. Officer Kozlov was still unaware of the magnitude of what was unfolding. He was actually planning to go home early, thinking his night's work was done. That plan changed when Captain Martinez called him into his office. "Kozlov, sit down. We need to talk about the Thompson arrest." For the first time since the arrest, Kozlov felt a slight uneasiness. "What about it, Captain?" "It was a routine DUI stop. I've reviewed the dash camera footage. Derek, there's nothing routine about what you did tonight." Captain Martinez played the footage for Kozlov, watching the officer's face carefully. Instead of showing remorse or concern, Kozlov became defensive. "That camera doesn't show everything, Captain. I could smell alcohol on him, and his eyes were bloodshot. The camera can't pick up those details." It was another lie, and Captain Martinez knew it. The footage clearly showed the general's eyes, which were clear and alert throughout the entire encounter, before the captain could respond. The front desk sergeant knocked on his door. "Captain, there are 2 FBI agents here to see you about the Thompson case." Kozlov's face went pale. FBI agents didn't show up for routine DUI arrests. Special Agents Walsh and Rodriguez entered the office with grim expressions. They had been briefed during their drive to the station and knew they were dealing with a serious case of police corruption. "Captain Martinez, I'm Special Agent Walsh, and this is Special Agent Rodriguez. We're here to investigate the arrest of General Thompson. We'll need to speak with the arresting officer and review all evidence related to this case." Agent Walsh turned to Kozlov with cold eyes. "Officer Kozlov, you have the right to remain silent, but I strongly advise you to cooperate with our investigation. This matter has attracted attention at the highest levels of the federal government." The gravity of the situation was finally beginning to hit Kozlov. He had expected to arrest a drunk driver and go home. Instead, he was facing a federal investigation that could end his career and possibly result in criminal charges. "I want a lawyer," Kozlov said quietly. "That's your right," Agent Rodriguez replied. "But understand that General Thompson is not just any citizen. He's a man who has devoted his life to serving this country, and if he has been falsely arrested, there will be serious consequences." While Kozlov was contemplating his situation, General Thompson remained in holding, maintaining his dignity despite the circumstances. Other inmates in the holding area had quickly realized they were sharing space with a high-ranking military officer, and word had spread throughout the jail. A young man named Marcus Williams, who was being held on minor charges, approached the general respectfully. "Sir, are you really a general in the Army?" "I am," Thompson replied calmly. "My brother is serving in Afghanistan right now. He's with the 82nd Airborne. Thank you for your service, sir." It was a small moment of respect in an otherwise humiliating situation, but it reminded General Thompson why he had dedicated his life to serving his country. Even in this corrupt situation, there were still good people who understood the value of military service. Back in the administrative area of the police station, the situation was escalating by the minute. The FBI agents had taken control of all evidence related to the arrest, including the dash camera footage, Kozlov's written report, and the booking photos. Agent Walsh was reviewing Kozlov's file and discovering a pattern of questionable arrests and citizen complaints. This was not the first time the officer had been accused of falsifying evidence or making arrests without proper cause. "Agent Rodriguez, look at this," Walsh said, pointing to Kozlov's record. 17 citizen complaints in the past 5 years, 8 internal investigations, and 2 previous incidents where charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. How is this guy still on the street? Rodriguez wondered aloud. Captain Martinez overheard the conversation and felt a deep sense of shame. He realized that his department had failed to properly supervise Kozlov and had allowed a corrupt officer to continue operating. "Agents, I take full responsibility for not acting sooner on Officer Kozlov. We've had concerns about his methods for some time, but we never imagined he would do something this reckless." The FBI agents appreciated the captain's honesty, but they knew that heads would roll over this incident. Arresting a U.S. Army general on false charges was not something that would be quietly swept under the rug. At exactly midnight, another phone call came into the police station. This time it was from the governor's office, and the caller was the governor himself. Captain Martinez, I'm calling to personally ensure that General Thompson is released immediately and that a full investigation is conducted into this matter. The general is a personal friend and one of the most honorable men I've ever met. If he has been falsely arrested, I want whoever is responsible held accountable. The pressure was mounting from every direction. Federal agents, the mayor, the governor, and high-ranking military officials were all demanding answers and justice. Officer Kozlov sat in an interview room with his lawyer, a tired-looking public defender who had been called in the middle of the night. The lawyer quickly realized that his client was in serious trouble. Derek, they have you on video making a false arrest. The dash camera footage clearly shows that the general was driving properly, and the audio proves that you lied about the field sobriety tests. You need to consider making a deal. But Kozlov was still in denial, refusing to admit that. The sun was setting behind the tall buildings of downtown Chicago when General Marcus Thompson stepped out of his black sedan. He had just finished a long day at the Military Recruitment Center, where he had been speaking to young men and women about serving their country. At 62 years old, General Thompson was a decorated veteran with 38 years of military service. He wore his uniform with pride, displaying ribbons and medals that told stories of courage and dedication. General Thompson was not just any military officer. He was one of the most respected generals in the U.S. Army, known for his integrity and his work in reforming military training programs. He had served in 3 different wars and had been personally commended by 2 presidents. Tonight he was driving home to his wife Sarah, looking forward to a quiet dinner and some time with his grandchildren who were visiting. As he drove through the city streets, General Thompson noticed red and blue lights flashing in his rearview mirror. He looked down at his speedometer and saw that he was driving exactly at the speed limit. Confused but cooperative, he pulled his car over to the side of the road and waited. Officer Derek Kozlov stepped out of his police cruiser with a swagger that immediately caught the general's attention. Kozlov was a man in his early 40s with a thick build and cold gray eyes. What the general didn't know was that Kozlov had a reputation among his fellow officers as someone who bent the rules. He had been with the Chicago Police Department for 15 years, but his career was marked by numerous complaints from citizens and several internal investigations. Kozlov approached the general's car with his hand resting on his weapon. "License and registration," he demanded without any greeting or explanation for the stop. General Thompson remained calm and polite. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why you stopped me?" "I was driving within the speed limit and following all traffic laws." Kozlov's face twisted into a sneer. "Don't give me attitude, old man. I saw you swerving back there. You been drinking tonight?" The accusation was completely false. General Thompson had not been drinking, nor had he been swerving. He had been driving perfectly straight, and his military training had taught him to always be aware of his surroundings and driving habits. "Officer, I assure you I have not been drinking and I was not swerving. I am a United States Army general, and I take my responsibilities very seriously, both in uniform and as a civilian." At the mention of his military rank, something dark flashed in Kozlov's eyes. The officer had always harbored resentment toward military personnel, feeling that they received too much respect and admiration from society. His own father had been a veteran who had struggled with alcohol and unemployment after returning from Vietnam, and Kozlov had grown up blaming the military for his family's problems. "I don't care if you're the president himself," Kozlov snarled. "Step out of the vehicle, now." General Thompson complied, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible. He knew that cooperation was the best approach, even though he was beginning to realize that this officer was not acting professionally. Kozlov ordered the general to perform field sobriety tests, which Thompson passed easily. His balance was perfect, his speech was clear, and his coordination was excellent. Any reasonable officer would have recognized that this man was completely sober. But Kozlov was not interested in facts or evidence. He was enjoying the power he held over this decorated military officer. "You failed," he announced falsely. "You're under arrest for driving under the influence." General Thompson's eyes widened in disbelief. "Officer, that is simply not true. I passed every test you administered, and you know it. This is a serious mistake. The only mistake here is you thinking your fancy uniform makes you better than everyone else," Kozlov replied as he roughly grabbed the general's arms and forced them behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut around General Thompson's wrists with a sound that seemed to echo in the evening air. For a man who had commanded thousands of soldiers and had been trusted with some of the nation's most sensitive military operations, being handcuffed by a corrupt police officer was both humiliating and shocking. As Kozlov pushed the general toward the police car, several passers-by stopped to stare. Some pulled out their phones and began recording the scene. They could see that something was wrong with this arrest. The man being handcuffed was clearly a high-ranking military officer, and he was cooperating completely. There was no struggle, no resistance, just a dignified older man being treated like a common criminal. "This is outrageous," one witness called out. "That man is a general." Kozlov turned toward the crowd with anger. "Mind your own business, or you'll be next." The threat silenced the onlookers, but they continued to watch and record. In the age of social media, nothing stayed hidden for long, and several people were already uploading videos of the arrest to various platforms. General Thompson found himself in the back of the police cruiser, his mind racing. He had faced enemy fire, had made life-and-death decisions in combat, and had dealt with international crises, but he had never experienced anything like this. The injustice of the situation was overwhelming, but his military training kicked in. He would remain calm, follow procedures, and trust that the truth would eventually come to light. During the drive to the police station, Kozlov was already planning his next moves. He knew that arresting a U.S. Army general would bring attention, but he was confident that he could make the charges stick. He had done it before with other innocent people, and the system had always protected him. His fellow officers rarely questioned his arrests, and supervisors generally supported their officers in disputes with civilians. What Kozlov didn't know was that General Thompson was not just any general. He was personally known by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, and several members of Congress. He had been involved in planning some of the military's most important operations over the past decade, and his sudden disappearance would not go unnoticed. At the police station, the booking process began. General Thompson was fingerprinted and photographed, treated like any common criminal despite his rank and service to his country. The duty sergeant, a veteran himself, looked uncomfortable as he processed the paperwork. He recognized the name and rank, and something about the situation didn't feel right to him. "General Thompson," the sergeant said quietly, "is there anyone you'd like to call?" This was the moment that would change everything, though neither the sergeant nor Officer Kozlov realized it at the time. General Thompson thought for a moment about who to call. His wife would be worried sick, but calling her would only upset her without solving the immediate problem. His lawyer was good, but this situation required something more. Then he remembered the card in his wallet. Just 2 weeks earlier, he had attended a classified briefing at the Pentagon. After the meeting, the Secretary of Defense had personally handed him a business card with a direct phone number. "General," the Secretary had said, "if you ever need anything, day or night, you call this number. After everything you've done for this country, we will always have your back." At the time, General Thompson had thought it was just a polite gesture. He never imagined he would actually need to use it. But as he sat in the police station falsely accused and humiliated, he realized that this was exactly the kind of situation the Secretary had been talking about. Meanwhile, Officer Kozlov was in the break room, bragging to other officers about his arrest. "You should have seen this guy," he laughed. "Thought his military rank would get him out of a DUI. I showed him that the law applies to everyone." Some of the younger officers laughed along, but the veterans in the room exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had served in the military themselves, and they knew that arresting a general was not something to be taken lightly, especially if the charges were questionable. Detective Maria Santos, a 20-year veteran of the force, approached Kozlov with concern. "Derek, are you sure about this arrest? A U.S. Army general? The paperwork alone is going to be a nightmare, and if there's any question about the validity of the charges..." Kozlov waved off her concerns. "The guy was drunk, plain and simple. I don't care if he's a general or a janitor. Nobody's above the law," but Detective Santos wasn't convinced. She had worked with Kozlov before and had always had doubts about his methods. She made a mental note to keep an eye on this case. Back in the holding area, General Thompson was given his one phone call. With steady hands, he dialed the number on the Secretary of Defense's card. The phone rang once, twice, and then a familiar voice answered. "Secretary Williams speaking?" "Mr. Secretary, this is General Marcus Thompson. I apologize for calling so late, but I find myself in an unusual situation that requires immediate attention." The secretary's voice immediately became alert. "General." "Thompson, what's happening?" "I've been arrested by the Chicago Police Department on false charges of driving under the influence. The officer involved appears to be corrupt, and I believe this arrest is completely without merit." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then the secretary's voice returned, cold and determined. "General, I want you to say nothing more to anyone until help arrives. This is completely unacceptable, and we will resolve it immediately." As General Thompson hung up the phone, he felt a